This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with host Ben Pratt.
And by the way, this is very emancipating for both the practitioner because, hey, I know what to work on. And it's very emancipating for the client, the person who is saying, I have these numbers and I can improve them. It helps you set your health goals.
Welcome to the second series of the Fit to Succeed show. I'm your host, I'm Ben Pratt. And after a 3-month break and a fairly successful first series of the podcast, we are now kicking off with our second series. I'm excited today because we have with us an excellent professional in the health and wellness space. And he is a leading health and nutrition professional. He is the founder of an organization in California called the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Center. And he's also an educator in his own right, as he has an FDN certification program, which we may talk about a little bit later on in the show. So welcome to the show, Reed Davis.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben. Real pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show, and particularly to draw upon someone who's got the level of expertise in nutrition, in particular with regards to laboratory testing and hormones. And that's going to be the topic of today's show, primarily around hormones and how they impact our health and wellness. So perhaps just to kick things off, Reed, you could just explain what the term functional diagnostic nutrition actually means, which is the name of your organization.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a term that I use to describe what we do in our profession. So basically, we're health coaches at a very high level because, as you said, we run the labs. We figure out what's really wrong with people. And then, of course, we have all natural protocols that will help them fix it. So it's a very empowering, very holistic program. FDN is actually a methodology. So it's a step-by-step method of investigation using the labs, but it's also a way of thinking about the human body, that it will heal itself if you can remove all the chaos and coach up function, if you will, support the body's systems. And so, the FDN, it just came from functional, which means we care about function. How are things really working? We have no interest in diagnosing disease. That's what doctors do, and we'll just let them have a monopoly on diagnosing and treating disease, right? We want to know what's really wrong. So it's very functional. It's about how the body, and then diagnostic, not medical diagnosis. That's very important. It's more diagnostic like you'd run on a car. You want to get some data on what's really wrong with it so you can fix it. So diagnostic in that sense, or the same as a computer technician would come in and diagnose, what's going on with your hard drive space or your software, things like that. We're not trying to medically diagnose a cluster of symptoms or something that would put us in the medical field. We're not there. And so it's functional, what's really going on with all the functions of the body. Diagnostic in that we get data, we collect data. And by the way, there's a lot of data being left on the table by physicians who are just diagnosing. They want to just sort of write a prescription for the symptoms, really. And so then it's nutrition, functional diagnostic nutrition, but it goes way beyond that. I think of more of nurturing. So nutrition, yes, you feed the body, you feed your cells, your tissues, your organs, all the systems, and you feed that, but it's really about nurturing maybe your state of mind or spirit or, on and on and on with that kind of a nurturing proposition or mindset. So functional diagnostic nutrition. In the end, it's just what I called my method that I've been developing for 8, 9, 10 years in the office. I had to call it something. And at the time, 11 years ago, when I started teaching the FDN course, it seemed like a good thing to call it.
Yeah, well, that's a great explanation.
Caught on.
Yeah, it certainly has. I think you're over 2,500 practitioners now around the world, so it's definitely caught on. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, sir.
You're well known as well for another phrase, actually, and I don't want you just to explain everything, but I think this one might begin to lead us into some of our discussion, which is you use the term dress for success, and the letters DRESS is an acronym. Would you mind just explaining what that acronym is and why that's so important to you?
Yeah, very, very pleased to do that. So if your methodology is to find out the underlying causes and conditions instead of just treating the symptoms, or because lab work is so readily available today, people are just treating the paper. So there's a difference. We don't want to just treat the paper. We don't want to just treat the symptoms. Once you figure out what's wrong with the lab test, and it might be your hormones, your immune system, digestive process, the detoxification processes, we find errors or what I call healing opportunities. So very important to understand that you must first assess for healing opportunities.
Mhm.
Once you discover them, how are you going to fix them? Again, we don't want to just treat the symptoms. Here's some supplements for make your symptoms go away. No, we want to teach a person how to fix it. And we want to work on ourselves, obviously. So I've been working in a clinic. We're very, very busy, seeing thousands of people over the years. And I just like to systematize things and make it easy for people to remember and to follow. You have to make it easy. So looking at all of the protocols, all of the things we were asking people to do, and of course, this would include making observations about what happens if they follow our instructions. I just came up with the fact that we're working on these 5 main areas. We go like this: DRESS. It pretty much will resolve almost every health problem if you follow the right D for diet,
Mhm.
R for rest or sleep, basically, but there's other types of rest. So D, diet, R, rest. E, exercise. That would be an easy one.
Mhm.
Then the 2 S's are stress reduction and supplementation.
All
Now, in
right.
supplements, I don't have my own brand. I've avoided doing that, but I know a lot about them. And then on stress reduction, it might be, other than diet, the biggest area that we can help our clients or help ourselves. Stress is ubiquitous. There's all kinds. There's all the mental, emotional stressors, the trauma to your body, of course, is a stressor. If you're in chronic pain, that's not a good thing. Very stressful. And of course, the chemical, biochemical, another stress in the environment, which I studied so well
Mhm.
my previous career. So it's dress for health success.
Mhm.
And it's DRESS, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplements. If you follow the lab guided recommendations, you will make improvements in your overall health, and even specific conditions will go away. Even serious diagnosed conditions where the medical treatment hasn't been effective, we've seen them consistently just disappear. When you restore every cell, every tissue, every organ and system using dress, it's amazing what happens.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it wouldn't have caught on very well.
Mhm. Definitely. I really like that acronym. I think it's such a simple and effective way to remember some of those key areas that are going to have a significant impact, as you suggest, on someone's overall health and wellness. And also, as you suggested there, their ability for their own body to heal without too much pushing or forcing with medications or other things like that. Now, you've mentioned this a couple of times, Reed, already, that there's a need to get down to the root cause. And I know you're a real advocate of testing someone rather than just guessing. And in so doing, I, I guess I feel that you tend to look for assessments in laboratory tests in preference to symptomology. Whereas if I went to my doctor today and he asked me what was wrong, he would then look for a list of symptoms to then give me a diagnosis. Can you perhaps just give us a bit of an explanation as to why you think the assessment matters so much more than just symptomology alone?
Oh, fantastic question. Yeah. So you're exactly right. Physicians want to know, why are you here in the office? And so do we. But what they do, because they don't have a lot of time, and their methodology is to try to get you those symptoms to go away. That's their job. And so that's great. For relief care, sometimes physicians can give you the shortest route to that state of less symptoms or no symptoms.
Mhm.
But the mistake is that they stop there. So in other words, if you go in with a traditionally reliable cluster of symptoms, so you got this cluster of symptoms. I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I feel sad, I'm constipated, I have, I'm gaining weight and I can't get rid of it. My hair is thinning. Well, that's a very reliable cluster of symptoms that would point the finger towards a metabolic problem or thyroid. So what the physician that's called a clinical diagnosis. It sounds like thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
And we all need to check ourselves, because this is not the best way to operate if you're really going to help people. We all have probably said, oh, it sounds like you have a parasite. It sounds like you have, thyroid problem. It sounds like you have irritable bowel syndrome or something like that. And then the physician might run a test. Like if you have a cluster of symptoms that sounds like thyroid, they will test your thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is they will find low thyroid output and say, I found your problem.
Right.
And of course, we know that low thyroid output is part of the problem, but it's not the problem. There's a reason why your thyroid is not putting out what it should, or that you're having those same symptoms. And so we just don't operate that way. Again, the physician is going to say cluster symptoms, sounds like thyroid, test the thyroid, say, yep, I found your problem, pat myself on the back, here's your prescription.
Right.
And what they're really doing is treating just the symptoms. Hopefully they will go away with that. And sometimes they do. That's not a bad thing. But they're really just treating the paper. They're going to titrate the dosage of the medication so that your test results now will show up in a certain range and say, okay, I fixed you. Your thyroid is now normal. Well, you haven't done anything to improve the function of the thyroid. You're just augmenting the thyroid hormone, and you might be getting an effect with that, but it hasn't changed the person's health. As a matter of fact, it just helps them ignore the real reasons why they're hypothyroid, which are multiple. There's easily 10 reasons why you have hypothyroid symptoms, and might even be a little hypothyroid. Well, nothing's actually wrong with the thyroid gland. There's all the other inputs and things going on without getting into too much detail, a lot of conversion and, receptorship and issues that would produce the exact same symptoms, and there's nothing really wrong with your thyroid. So our outlook then is to run labs that give us upstream healing opportunities. You can have low thyroid output for a lot of reasons, as I said. So here's another acronym for you, Ben.
Okay,
and then I'll turn it back over to you. So when we do our search, we look at HIDDEN, hidden. And it's funny because they're hidden. Most of these things are hidden. There are problems with the hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system balance. So those 6 things, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system balance. In other words, the autonomic, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Those 6 areas, if you can identify the imbalances and, again, healing opportunities and work on them with the DRESS program, you're going to feel better. You're going to start actually improving underlying physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, things that are really important. In other words, it's what's really going on in the body. And so I've just organized it. I've just done I have a ton of experience running labs, thousands of labs on thousands of people. I had amazing mentorship and good doctors back in the day and to this day who would be considered alternative practitioners for guidance. But I also did my own homework, and I found a lot of pieces of the puzzle on my own. And so now we share all of that through our program. It's a training program for anyone to work on yourself or to work on clients. But we basically look for the hidden stressors, dysfunctions, what's really wrong. And then we use the DRESS program. We teach people how to follow the DRESS program so that they just get better. And if they are really sick, let's say they had a true medical condition like cancer, that's a medical condition. You need medical oversight on that because you could die if you don't have it. But we would be, what it doesn't fix, it provides an amazing holistic grounding program for that person, so they might need less medical intervention or eventually no medical intervention.
Yeah, so that program can potentially be supportive of what the physicians are doing for that individual. Absolutely.
Right, and then where the person's going to a physician and they're not getting the help they need. They're not really making any improvement. It's just the program so
Mhm.
that you wouldn't need a physician unless you have a true medical condition. Um,
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Reed. I think there's many people perhaps who are looking for answers to why they're just not feeling quite right. Maybe whether it's digestive bloating or a discomfort, or maybe they're just struggling with their weight. And actually, this is the kind of stuff that many health and fitness professionals, because we're obviously in the fitness industry, many health and fitness professionals are faced with those kind of queries and questions from clients on a regular basis. There is no diagnosed condition from a doctor or physician, but the person isn't quite right. And so they're looking sometimes to personal trainers and fitness professionals to assist and to help them. Now, one of the challenges with that, as you may well be aware, Reed, is that often personal trainers don't have access to labs. They may not be signed up to be able to do blood tests or have the ability to do that. And so I'm just wondering what other tools outside of a hard lab test could a health or wellness professional utilize to try and move towards some improvement in a client's health?
that's a great question, and I have been reliant on the labs for 20 years, but it should never diminish the importance of taking a good history from a person. You can find out things about a person by just speaking with them and asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we have forms that we have people fill out. So we have what we call a metabolic chaos assessment intake form.
Mm-hmm.
It only takes 19 or 20 minutes to fill out. The client would go through it, or the person would go through it, and grade various symptoms and even objective observations about how they feel or look after these questions, and they're categorized. So we can come up with the points. Let's say you fill out the whole form and you come up with 500 points. These are basically negative points. The goal would be 0 points,
Right.
but nobody has 0 points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even the best of us have points. They're just things that you still have left to work on, and that's the nature and beauty of our work. It's often referred to as a journey towards health. It's up a set of stairs. So some people would come to us and they have a lot of stairs to climb. I mean, they're just train wrecks, pardon the expression.
Mm-hmm.
They're way overweight. They have no energy. They feel like crap all the time. And believe it or not, some of these people will go to a physician and get their standard blood work done and be told, there's nothing really wrong with you. Well, things look kind of in range. So go do something. They just get told, go do diet and exercise. And of course, the person leaves feeling dejected, just unsatisfied. And they can get caught up in a real cycle of trial and error. There's lots of opportunistic programs out there that would say, try my program, especially the weight loss field, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But any other area of complaint, the hormones and all the different things. So they are caught in that cycle of trial and error. That's the whole point of my system, is to take those people who either have been told by the physician nothing wrong,
Mm-hmm.
or have been just written prescriptions and they know that's not going to get to the root
Mm-hmm.
of the problem. So
Yep.
they go off on this cycle of trial and error, and they could spend a ton of money on stuff that just doesn't work. It's just not addressing enough of their problem.
You hit the nail on the head there, really, because I've certainly in my career as a fitness professional have had individuals come to me who've done exactly that. They've been to the doctor. The doctor has not found anything wrong with them, but the person doesn't feel right. And so often fitness professionals are the ones trying to help that person improve their health when they've been given medical clearance, so to speak, and there's nothing wrong with them from a medical perspective, but there's clearly something not right because their symptomology is still poor. And this, I like the idea of using questionnaires, using forms, because that can help, like you suggest, to potentially dial in towards the areas that need the most improvement. So rather than just taking like I think a good analogy in regards to lab testing can be a shotgun approach. Well, which labs do I pick out of the hundreds that are available? At least if you ask some questions and you get a good history, you can dial it into the areas that actually look like they may be problematic. And then if you did have to pay out to get some lab testing done, at least you're in the right field or the right area.
Yeah, it's tricky there because the shotgun approach, or we get asked all the time, which lab should I run? Well, if I explain to you that there are 5 different labs, so we have these labs we run. Now, the problem is here, whatever it might be, their main complaint and a couple side complaints. You have to get people to focus on 1 or 2 things that they want to improve. Something about the way they look or feel they want to improve. Well, I've determined after thousands and thousands of cases that those problems, it's going to be very difficult to just pick the one test. Like it's because of this, because it could be because of this and this and this. And so I recommend 5 labs. Now I know that there's a barrier there, especially financially for some people. Some people can't make the stretch mentally. Like, why should I check my digestive system when my problem is the thyroid? I have these thyroid symptoms. Or why should I check my immune system? Well, what we've found is that if you just check these 5 systems, basically, or 6 systems with 5 labs, that you're going to uncover enough healing opportunities to have an effect on whatever the heck the problem is.
Right.
We don't really want to focus too much on the symptoms. We want to see what areas can be improved. Can your hormones be improved? Yes. Can your immune system be improved? Yes. It might need to be more active or less active when it comes to digestion. Obviously, if you're not breaking down and assimilating food properly, getting all the nutrients and micronutrients out of it, because you could be eating great food, but it's really not doing you a lot of good. And so you have to pay attention to those things. Is your detoxification system working well? And there's 5 major organs to the detox system. We test the liver mostly. That's one of those tests out here, detoxification. But it's very reflective of the others. It will give an indicator of how congested you might be. So again, you have the problem and you have the opportunity to get data in these areas. And I've just uncovered this truth that if you fix these 5 or 6 things, that problem, whatever it is going to improve or go away completely. And it could even be a serious diagnosed condition. That's the amazing thing. So when you say which test, it's like, which kid do you want to,
so
get rid of? It's difficult. So now I just need to back up a bit and have you realize that the labs don't really improve anything on their own. It's the dress protocol that is what's going to make the changes.
Good point.
So the labs are just used to help individualize the dress protocol for that person. We know what the healing's opportunity. And by the way, this is very emancipating for both the practitioner, because, hey, I know what to work on. And it's very emancipating for the client, the person who is saying, I know I have these numbers and I can improve them. It helps you set your health goals, to get your hormones in balance, get your immune system quieted down, because it's overactive or whatever it might be with detoxification, digestion, energy production. And again, this idea of the sympathetic and parasympathetic, the nervous system being very balanced. And so, it's up to each individual practitioner to walk the talk and then to teach. We can teach people. I've never cured anything, and no one has on another person. You can only sort of cure yourself. You can do these things and see your cells, tissues, organs, and systems just start working better.
I like that.
It's really quite, yes.
I like that. Particularly that you've mentioned there, Reid, primarily a systems-based approach of working with a system and trying to help the system have the health and the strength to pull itself back together rather than chasing symptoms, as you kind of indicated. Now, I wonder if we could just turn our thoughts, because we're coming from the angle of the health and fitness profession. I thought we could try and identify 2 or 3 of the areas that typically health and fitness professionals are sought out for, and how the hormones in particular, let's talk a bit about hormones, how they might have an impact and how you might manage that. So perhaps the first and the biggest rock that most health professionals or fitness professionals have to deal with is this concept of managing weight or obesity or a calorie excess, whatever it may be. And certainly many people just look as weight management as being a calories in versus a calories out approach, and don't take any investigation further beyond the pure energy dynamics. Now, we know today through science that there is many hormones that play a role or are associated with weight gain, from insulin or cortisol, leptin or ghrelin, to name just a few. And of course, I'm sure you've read the internet has so many different opinions on whether these are relevant or not, or whether it's just about calories. What are your views in that discussion? And do you have any priority in how you manage overweight?
Yes, of course. Overweightness, especially when it gets into obesity, things can actually be very harmful to your health. Obese people have more illness, more health problems, and they die sooner than people who are not obese. And it's rampant. I think in the United States, if you just go shopping, it looks like half the people are obese. It's quite remarkable. And so they're definitely they have metabolic issues, but they didn't start out that way. Not too many, there are some obesity genes, if you will, but it's really a lifestyle based problem. So that's where we go. We look at the obesity as being that symptom. It's just another symptom of modern life and ignorance and bad habits and advertising, as you know. The things that are advertised the most are the things that are worst for you. Anything out of a bag or box probably isn't that nutritious. It might satisfy other needs though, or desires and things, and it's advertised that way. You're going to feel better if you eat chips and soda. It's so ridiculously not true. So we're all subject to modern ills by just the way society is today. So, but not too much on that. So we look at obesity, or just being 20 pounds overweight, as a symptom. It's just like any other symptom. And when you get the metabolic processes, and again, this is going to include the lab work, and if not, are just normal intake forms and things like that, pointing us in the direction. We're trying to customize the DRESS program for that individual. And so that's why we look at tests, and we never treat the test, but we use it just as, because we look at it as, whose test is this? I think Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, we don't concern ourselves with the disease, but the person who has the disease. That's much more important. Modern medicine doesn't work that way. It focuses on the disease and not the person. They don't work with people. They work with cohorts. Everything about drugs, for instance, is, here's 50,000 people. Well, which one are you? And you might be the one that died from that medication, and there's no way to know. So we don't work with cohorts. We work with individuals. And if someone's overweight and obese, that's just another symptom of metabolic inefficiencies, which can be corrected over time. And again, the word time is really critical, because if you're dying, you need a physician to save your life, get you out of the woods. Like if you're drowning, you need to get a life jacket on real quick. And that's what physicians are great at, and why we have a nice partnership with them. But once you got the life jacket on and you get over to the edge of the drowning pool, well, now what? This is where allied health practitioners can really step in and be useful. So we would set goals, and we would help people walk that path. Again, it's just like me. I'm 66 years old. I'm in reasonably good shape for having such a well-used body.
You are.
And, and some people might say abused body. The sports and the motorcycle riding and things have been hurt many times. But, so I'm on the path too. And I have people that I look up to and who might be a little further along. And there's people who, obviously, I'm in the business of helping those who have more steps to climb. And we just help them up with this methodology, mentality, and what are the first steps? Well, when it comes to obesity and these things, diet is huge. And so I use what a good friend of mine developed, Bill Wolcott developed 30 years ago, metabolic typing system. And when I started in the clinic 20 years ago, I struggled with what's the right diet for everyone. Well, guess what? There isn't a diet that's right for everybody. What's bandied about today, and I like it, is called the ancestral diet.
Mm-hmm.
Like my ancestors are the same as yours. You know, they're people who lived in caves and they hunted. And they went out and they killed deer and rabbits and anything else they could get their grubby hands on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the women would gather seasonal nuts and seeds and throw it in a pot. And, you know, we got plenty of fresh air, exercise, really good sleep and all these things. And, you know, things weren't what they are today.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a correct diet. And then for every person, there absolutely is a genetically correct diet. Now, if everyone ate that same sort of ancestral diet, some of them would do very well, some of them would see little effect, and some would get worse.
Right.
Because that's the nature of the animal. It's no different, by the way, than supplements. People say, what's the best supplement for this or that? Well, there's some guidelines, of course, but a supplement can only do three things: make you feel better, do nothing, or make you feel worse.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, 2 out of 3 are kind of negative. You know, it didn't do anything, or it made me feel worse. So it's so individualized. And if you don't have a groundwork for what are those individualizing factors, you know, what makes us different, and the genetics is huge. So you want to eat a diet that is the right amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrates for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can dial it in, kind of like the old-fashioned radio dials. You can dial in, man, I feel so good when I get that macronutrient ratio right. It's the macronutrient ratio. So with an obese person, I wouldn't start on their hormones right away.
Right.
I would start with, what's your ratio of protein, fat, and carbs?
Mm-hmm.
And then, as important, but a little harder to figure out sometimes, which ones? Because again, genetically, your food ratios, your carb, fat, the macronutrient ratios are genetically determined. If you get the fuel mixture just right, your cells should burn that fuel. That's fuel, and the building blocks of the body, and it should burn at the right rate, quality, quantity, and in the cells. And then those cells would do their job better. Mm-hmm. They sure would. And so do you have to teach the cell what its job is? No. It's pre-programmed. You know, there's an innate intelligence in every cell, all the tissue and organs and systems, but they have an innate intelligence. And so we want to fuel them properly and start there. Mm-hmm. Then things like hormones, and especially the stress hormones, come into play. I'd be happy to answer any questions about stress hormones. I've run literally thousands and thousands of those kind of tests.
Well, just before we do that, I wonder whether there's just somebody, like you said, who's run thousands of tests, who's seen lots and lots of labs come in, and I totally agree and understand what you're saying about that. Everyone has an individualized diet, and perhaps there are some big rocks like diet or exercise that we can manage even before we have to look at lab tests when working with someone who is obese. But let's say that those things are in process and you now are looking at lab tests. Are there any hormones that you have noticed are more commonly out of balance in people who are overweight or obese compared to others?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few. You mentioned ghrelin and leptin and things. These are more like fine-tuning kind of hormones. Your body should know when you're hungry. It should know when you're satiated. Mm-hmm. And that's regulated by hormones as well. And you can be producing those hormones, but the receptorship can be very poor. That's more of a fine-tuning thing later, the leptin and ghrelin. So we'll leave that kind of off the table for now. Big ones are cortisol and DHEA. Right. For the most part, they're made in the adrenal glands. But they're made in different areas of the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are actually 4 glands in one. We won't go into the anatomy so much as just saying, look, when you're under stress, and who isn't, you will produce more cortisol. And it actually needs to be counter-regulated by DHEA. It's dehydroepiandrosterone, but we call it DHEA. That's the counter-regulatory hormone to cortisol. Cortisol, one, is very catabolic, meaning it breaks the body down. People with excessive cortisol in ratio to the DHEA are in a catabolic state. Their bodies are breaking down. Your body will break down every fiber to try to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And cortisol is one of the main drivers of that. It's trying to raise your blood sugar to keep your brain active.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without blood sugar, you won't. You'll go to sleep. You'll have foggy thinking and things like this. Now you can have too much blood sugar, on and on, but you need cortisol to handle stress. But the issue today is that stress is so constant. You know, if everything was normal and you get cut off in traffic, some jerk, you know, runs you off the road or whatever, you would survive. Your cortisol would go way up, but in, you know, an hour at the most, it'd be back down. At the most, it would be back to everything would be normal. Well, today, the amount of stress we have and the various types of stress, mental, emotional stress, physical stress, biochemical and environmental stress, it's really just ubiquitous in our life. So we don't get a chance to get back into the parasympathetic mode and get a break.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we don't even know it. A lot of it, if it's the air you're breathing and what's in your food and water and you know, in your environment with the clothing and furniture outgassing and the electromagnetic frequencies and radiation. And if you look at how ubiquitous stress is, not to mention the poor relationships we have with others and with our own selves, you know, it's just stressful. Or the aches and pains that you have from an overused body like mine. You know, it just really rains down on you, and you will get into this catabolic state. So before you get into leptin and ghrelin and these things that are very important, you want to get those two, the stress and the counter-regulatory distress, the catabolic and the anabolic, which is the building up of all of these tissues. And it is the parent of all your sex hormones, by the way, you know, testosterone and things like that, critically important. Especially the older you get, the more you might feel the negative effects. But I'm noticing there's 22-year-olds today with less testosterone than I have. Because at least I started out in a good environment. My grandfathers both grew their own food. I played outside, you know, like until it was dark every night growing up. We didn't have video games and all this stuff. So I think that and just good genetics and things, you know, I got lucky. But
can I ask you another question there, Reed? Is something you mentioned is you pointed out that stress and cortisol is a highly catabolic hormone, and obviously it breaks things down and prepares glucose for the brain and the body. And something that naturally comes to my mind, and I wonder if the listeners might be wondering too, is, well, if it's a breakdown hormone, a catabolic hormone that breaks down fats and glucose, how then is it a contributory hormone in the weight gain scenario?
Well, it raises blood sugar for one thing, and blood sugar in abundance is going to, what can't be used by the body right away is going to be stored as fat. You know, so cortisol is a fat storing hormone, and it will just, especially around the midsection, it just seems to affect the midsection more, and you get what's called brown fat, or, you know, just visceral fat, and it's there, and it thinks it's doing the right thing. This is your body adapting to the stress. So under stress, what would happen to us? We would put on some weight to protect us, especially around the organs, because that function, the stress response, if you will, doesn't know or care what kind of stress it is. And we are stressed out, and yet because we're human, and a lot of us are, you know, we want to see the world as the cup half full all the time. We're very positive and outgoing and aggressive and assertive and gregarious, and, you know, we want to be happy, so we ignore half the stuff. You know, we just pretend that we're okay and wonder why can't we get rid of this visceral fat, even those of us who work out and try to eat right and things like that. So stress is something that has to be managed, and we just don't do it. We don't have the technique. We don't have the self-awareness. You know, you can get up every day being pretty happy going to work, Um, you know, there's a song by Jackson Brown called "The Pretender." You know, he talks about the happy idiot who he just goes and pounds on fenders for a living and comes home and just wants to drink a beer and be happy and have no one bother him or overtax him or or something like that.
That'd be nice.
And that's yeah, but it's it's idyllic, but not real. You're gonna get stressed out. You're gonna have these problems. So you're gonna be in that catabolic state.
Mhm.
What we want to do is become more self-aware and work on the balance.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there's some other balances too, just like that. I'm not sure I answered your question properly, but the idea of cortisol, it's gonna continuously try to keep sugar. Also, your adrenaline goes right along with that. So
Mhm.
now you've got excess heart rate. You've got an excess of pulse. You've got blood and nutrition and things more like gravitating towards the central nervous system to protect you. You're in this fight flight mode. When
Mhm.
you're in fight flight, that's okay for a little bit. You want to stand your ground and fight when you have to. Run if you can, some of the time. And but you don't want to be in that state all the time. You need to rest
Mhm.
and digest your food and reproduce, and things like that are very parasympathetic dominant activities.
Yeah.
So we get into that catabolic fight flight, and that's the deal.
Yeah, and I see that, and that obviously the stress, the cortisol, raised blood glucose, then has a knock-on effect with insulin, and I see that sort of step-by-step process. I think you answered that pretty well. Amazingly, Reed, we're actually coming up on time already. There is one other,
Oh,
yeah, one other question I wanted to ask you just before we wind up, and that is that is there any exciting or upcoming field of development in the world of nutrition that you're aware of that perhaps the listeners should keep their eye out on?
well, I think they should look into metabolic typing, which is, though it's not new, it is underrepresented in the uh, allied health field. The sort of just health building, health coaching, anything along those lines of nutrition and personal training, and even nursing and these registered dietitian fields and things like that, metabolic typing, and also genes. So I'm not. I think I've been to some lectures and watched a lot of webinars on genetic uh, assessments, and they're important. I even mentioned them myself. I mean, metabolic typing is based on genetics, so I think that's a field to keep our eye on. And I'm
Mm.
personally undergoing my second round of genetic testing
Oh,
and
interesting.
education. The first round
Mm.
didn't work out so well because the people, there's technology because you can do something and you think it's useful. You kind of come up with an edge or an angle, and then you sell it. In today's world, we see if it sells. People will buy anything. So you could have a test that's being bandied about as, oh, this is the test, genetic requirement, and yet you're really just treating the SNPs. I can't get into all the details, but it's again, they're treating the paper and not the person. So genetics is I say the latest and greatest, but we want to not continue the same. Oh, here's a new test. Let's treat the
Yeah.
paper, and that we got to get into how individualized it is, and nothing's going to beat the Dress for Health Success program
Mhm.
because that's how you affect changes. There's not going to be a drug or one pill that's going to be able to control the genetic expression. It's how you live. Genes are important, but they're only 8 or 9% of what matters. The other 91 or 92% is living. It's the expression of the genes. But I'm going to be able to report to you the next level very soon here.
Mhm.
And there's a lot more to go on where we were at. I didn't know we run out of time.
Yeah,
I'm happy to come back.
yeah, I think we had lots still to talk about for sure. It would have been great to get into some more of that detail, but I think if there's anything that the listeners probably have got from this discussion, it's this important and the need to individualize the approach and to use helpful health and lifestyle strategies to try and manage some of the systems so that they can heal on their own. It's been really great talking with you, Rita. I appreciate your time. And like you said, it would be great perhaps in the future to bring you back and to talk about some of these things in a little bit more depth. So thank you very much. And we will link up all of our listeners on the show notes with the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Certification and your website, so that if they want to find out any more about you, that they can do so. Thank you, Reid.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. Been a real pleasure.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.